Hi, welcome to Key Questions with Key Staffers. My name is Jim Adderholt. I'm the Vice Mayor for the town of Fort Myers Beach. And this is a show where we find key subject matter experts to discuss particularly post-Ian recovery. And we try to get out as much information as we can. We'll certainly post this show on the town's social media platforms. Our friends at Beach Talk Radio have been kind enough to play it before their regular scheduled programming on Fridays and Saturdays. And we ask our friends at the Observer, the News Press, the local TV stations to link to this particular program when they're writing a story that's germane to it. And we also ask our friends at home on Facebook, if you find something here that you think would be helpful for your friends and neighbors, to go ahead and post it on your Facebook page as well, because that really helps us get the word out. Abraham Lincoln said, let the country know the facts, and let the people know the facts, and the country will be saved. And this is our small attempt to do that here in Fort Myers Beach. We've got a great program today. We're going to be talking with the head of our community development, Steve Poposki. Then we're going to take we're going to go mobile, and we're going to look at the sand dunes and talk a little bit about the emergency berm with Chad Chustz at the end of the show. But before I get into that, before we get into Steve here in a second, I just want to take a minute because I was over at the Diamond Head this morning. They had what was called an insurance village, and they had representatives of most of the insurance companies at the Diamond Head. They had the insurance regulators there. I spoke with Jimmy Petronis, who's the CFO for the state of Florida. He was there. His people were there. The state insurance commissioner was there. The insurance consumer advocate was there. And they had a tremendous turnout of citizens there, and I hopefully a lot of folks had a chance to go there. By the time you see this, that'll have been over. But the reason why I mention this is that if you weren't able to go to Diamond Head and you're still having trouble with your insurance company, there's three entities that regulate insurance in the state of Florida. But if you have a complaint, the one to file the complaint with is the Department of Financial Services. And that phone number is 1-877-693-5236. Again, that's the Department of Financial Services. It's the Insurance Consumer Hotline. It's 1-877-693-5236. And that's important for a number of reasons. Number one, it'll help get your insurance company to at least reach out to you. But as importantly, the Department of Financial Services and the Office of the Florida Office of Insurance Regulation, they keep track of how many complaints they get and which company is getting the complaint. And if enough complaints come to a particular company, obviously based upon the size of that company, they will launch what's called a market conduct exam. And I talked to the CFO today and the insurance commissioner, and they told me today that they have launched multiple market conduct exams of these problematic insurance companies who are making the life of our residents extremely difficult here on the island. They could not reveal the names of the company, but they said that multiple investigations have been launched. And what that means is they literally hire an outside auditing firm to come in to analyze the claims paying practices of these companies that have received a lot of complaints. And the outside audit is paid for by the company itself. And then once they get the result of that audit, the CFO and the insurance commissioner can then force these companies to pay their claims as they should, pay legitimate claims. So that's why it's so important that you file a complaint, again, with the Department of Financial Services, because then they aggregate the number of complaints, and if they get enough complaints, they'll launch one of these market conduct exams, and then that can end up providing relief to everybody that's had trouble with that particular company. So that's that for today, but we're so thankful to have Steve Poposki with us today. Steve has one of the most difficult jobs on the island, one of the most important jobs on the island. And I wanted to kind of ask you, Steve. Steve oversees permitting along with a number of other things, but obviously the focus is on permitting, as it should be. And I just wanted to start off by just asking how you're doing, Steve, and how are things going at permitting?
It's going well. The island is being built back pretty rapidly, I think. I think we've recovered quite well, considering the damage that was done by Hurricane Ian. We continue to process permits as quickly as possible. Our intent is to make this, we have to meet our obligations as far as the NFIP, National Flood Insurance Program, the Florida Building Code, and our own ordinances. But that being said, we try to make this as simple as possible, but still collect the information that we need. And that's really I think the intent of this video is to make sure that that is communicated in the right way. There's a few things that are being very commonly left off of the application. Sometimes it's as simple as a signature or someone's name, but sometimes it's maybe a form or that. So, perhaps we could clear that up today.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about what. First of all, let's talk about what a lot of people have been coming to see to the trailer here at the temporary town hall, 2525 Estero, and your folks will meet with people personally and they'll help them. And obviously, you guys get emails as well and some phone calls. What's the preferred way for people to communicate with you? What's the most efficient way? Obviously, everybody can't come here because some folks are not on the island. But what works best for your team? How would you like to hear from people?
I think the best way is the way that the permit applicant is most comfortable with. I mean, if they are comfortable with a phone call, we're happy to take those. We have people answering the phones. We have email. Email is probably the most efficient way of getting both information in and out. We can send links to websites and further explain things. So email is quite useful. The website has been expanded quite a bit since the storm, so a lot of information on there as well. And of course, if all else fails, you can come in and in person. If
people are sending you an email with a question, what are things that you look for in email? And say when they come in person, what is it that you generally need for them to have with them or include in their email to allow you to help them better?
Well, definitely include your name and your address in your email. We're getting a high volume of information coming in, so make sure that if you have a permit number, include the permit number, say in the subject line. Your address is always going to be very helpful. We can look up your records if we have your complete address.
Okay, and when people I know everybody's got their own unique situation, but what are some of the most, and I know it's evolving. We have this wonderful frequently asked questions section on the town's website under the permitting sand dollar. Just click that. I think are we still at 97 or have we surpassed that?
Yeah, high 90s, I would say.
But you don't have to read every single one of those, but skim those FAQs. There's such great information in there. Encourage your contractor to read those FAQs. It can save you so much grief down the line. But again, in terms of the questions people are asking, what's the most common things you're being asked at this point in the process?
I think a lot of it revolves around the National Flood Insurance Program and those requirements. Not everyone is necessarily familiar with that, and we understand. A lot of people are doing this for the first time, and we understand that as well. So we've been helping a lot of people doing what we call owner-builder. Owner-builder is when you are acting as your own general contractor. So if you're the property owner and you live there and are going to live there after the storm, you're allowed to do that, but you have to provide certain documentation as well. So that's a very common, those type of questions, but also people are not necessarily familiar with permitting in general in Florida, perhaps. So we've been doing a lot of, one-on-one consultations and whatnot.
But the most common question, though, there's not something that it sounds like you get just a wide variety of questions. There's not one or two questions that you just get on a regular basis that you could just share today, or is it more nuanced than that at this point?
Well, I did prepare a list. I can go through it.
Please do.
But I think in general, the cost form, the NFIP requirement for that's real common. There's a few pages there, and it's just about providing enough information. Is this for the
owner-builder permit, or is this
it's for everyone? But the owner-builder, I was going to say, is one of my items. It's very common for them to forget that form. There's some confusion. For example, the number one, there's a repair improvement cost form, and there's an owner and a qualifier acknowledgement. There's pages for those.
What's the name of the form?
It's the owner and. There's a form that says owner acknowledgement and one that says qualifier acknowledgement.
And this would be for somebody who's trying to accomplish what? What kind of a permit? Or is it for all the permits?
It's for the cost form.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's one on the cost form.
And the cost form is used for people who want to do what?
Do anything on the island. Yeah.
So all these permits have a cost form involved.
Right.
Okay.
Right. It's required that we record the amount of improvement that's done or repair that's done to a building, and compare that to the pre-damaged market value of the building, and obviously that's called the 50% rule.
Okay.
So
this cost form, you're trying to aggregate all the costs so you can calculate the 50% rule because, not because you're a mean guy, but because FEMA at some point will come in and audit us, correct?
Right.
And audit these individual folks. And if something is amiss in this, they could literally come in and have somebody have to rebuild or tear down, or it could be that dramatic, right?
It could, on an individual basis, there's things that would happen. For example, if you were over 50%, but for whatever reason you weren't required to elevate, you could be later required to elevate your home or demolish it, or resolve it in some way. So that's obviously a situation we want to avoid, and that's why we do that at the permitting process. It makes it a little more involved in the permitting, and that's true across all jurisdictions. It's important to notice that this is not just the beach, it's all across the state. They all have the same rules as far as recording these costs, and they use very similar forms.
So help somebody, when you see mistakes in the cost form, just kind of give a general sense of what should people be thinking about when they fill out a cost form as they're working on their permit.
You need to include this. I would just say follow the instructions on the form. They do have instructions at the bottom. If you're filling out the cost form, and I have a printout, but it's going to be hard to find to see on camera. But just fill out each line. Each line is going to need an entry. If you're doing something on a different permit, put see other permit or something to that effect, so that the person who's reviewing it knows that you already had, say, your electric all repaired. So on that electric line, you would put, completed on different permit, for example, and just kind of fill out the form. And there's another page there's a certain amount of information you need to provide as far as extra detail. So you can't just say drywall. You need to give us some amount of detail so we know how much drywall we're talking. Are we talking about 2 sheets of drywall, or is there 200 sheets of drywall?
So detail, you mean by how much? Some specific numbers?
You don't need down to every screw or anything like that, but we just need some amount of information to give us a sense of what is the scope of work, both what are you doing and how much of this are you doing. I mean, are we doing the baseboards throughout the entire house, or are we just doing, 100 linear feet in this one room? For example.
And so when you see this, when you see the applications come in, and you look at the ones that get kicked back, is it generally for lack of information, or is there specific mistakes that are being made by either the contractor or the resident? Can you walk through what you're seeing? Because we don't want people to submit it right in the first place, because then it generally sails through relatively smoothly, correct?
Right. Yeah, our intent is that we would love to be able to approve every application, but unfortunately some of these are just missing information. And in our perfect world would be everybody just sails through and gets it, approved that day. That's where we'd love to be there. That's the ideal world. Some of the things that they're just missing, they're not completing the application fully. Maybe they're not including the scope of work, or they're not including the job value, or you're not completing the form completely.
What do you see most common in that? You mentioned some other forms that were left out sometimes that last time we met. Are you still seeing that as well? Certain forms, signatures or release forms or affidavit? I can't remember exactly what you said. There was a couple of things that were often left out.
We tried to make this simpler, so we put it all into one packet. So you'll notice that the application is a little longer, or more pages than maybe you had experienced in the past. But the problem is that we had separate applications and people weren't clicking on the other applications, so we just put them together. So maybe the application has 14 pages now, but it's a lot of that's information just to try to help you, to try to educate and make it more likely that you will won't have to go through multiple reviews. So there's lots of different things. There's
go ahead and touch on
the correct application. Like, for example, if you're doing just inside work, you'll be doing an interior remodel permit. If you're doing outside and inside, but on the other hand, if you're doing outside and inside work, for example, if you want to throw on your roof on there as well, if you want to do siding, soffits, all that outside work, you can get a residential permit. So interior remodel, residential, 2 different things. That's one thing. A lot of times they're just missing, and again, this is on the application, but they're missing the Florida product approval numbers. So any product that you're using on the outside of your building, like windows, doors, the roofing material, the dry-in material on the top, all that, soffits. It all has a Florida product approval number that's required that we need to verify before. So to make sure that you're installing the right things on your house, that we don't have to go back and change it later.
Is that different? Like on the windows and doors, there's also you have to demonstrate that they have the right the ability to take a certain amount of wind and pressure. Mm-hmm. Is that different?
It's very similar. It's all related to for example, if you're putting in windows, and we could have a whole video about windows, but windows need to either be impact rated or need to be protected by like a shutter system or some sort of impact protection. That's one requirement in the Florida Building Code. Another one is what's called design pressure, and that's I don't know how technical we want to get, but it's on the application. There's a Florida product approval number. It'll say something like 239.4, and that'll be like the actual product that you're going to use, and that. It's right here. If you look on floridabuilding.org, you can find the product approval number, and if you enter in 239.4, you'll get it, and it'll say impact resistant, yes. It'll also have a link here to their installation instructions, their certificate of approval, and you can find out a lot of information about how to install the window, whether it meets the design pressure, and so forth.
What's your experience in terms of, you see all the permits coming in, the ones that are done by contractors, obviously the contractors who do work on the island on a regular basis, they understand our process relatively well. Are you seeing challenges from contractors who don't normally do work here? Do they seem to run into issues in terms of filling out the forms correctly? In other words, and what would residents advise their contractor to do? Is it to read the FAQs? What should they be telling their contractors? Say, hey, we want our application to go through smoothly, so be sure to do this and this and this. What should they tell their contractor?
Yeah, I would say just read the application carefully as you're filling it out. Make sure you fill it out completely. Don't forget to sign it. The instructions are there. It's just a matter of making sure that you read them, I think. I mean, I think it's understandable that someone from outside of an area, when they're first coming to the area, that they may initially have a little more trouble just because there's different regulations in each jurisdiction.
Okay.
So, I mean, working with their design professional is always recommended.
And what do you mean by that?
Like an engineer or an architect, if you're remodeling your entire home, it may be advisable to work with a design professional so they can help prepare plans. They know all of this information as well as far as Florida Building Code, and they're very familiar with different jurisdictions' requirements as well.
So let's say you lived on the island, your home was completely destroyed, you had a lot and you wanted to rebuild. How would you put your team together and how would you work that just for best practices? I mean, everybody can do it differently, but you just hire a general contractor, and then you have an architect. I mean, kind of walk people through what would be a relatively strategic way to do that. I mean, I know there's multiple ways, but what would be a relatively painless way to do it?
Well, I think it's depending on the person, right? So if they're very experienced with construction, perhaps in a different state, they may have an easier time. If you're not particularly sort of well-versed in Florida law, then you may want to work with an engineer architect and contact them as far as developing a plan, especially if you're building an entire house. You have the right to do it all yourself as the owner builder. If you're the property owner of record, if you're living there, they allow you to do it all yourself, but it's really not necessarily recommended because there's a lot to it. People do this for a living, that this is all they do is they build. So there's a lot to learn, and although it's an available option, it's just not generally recommended.
And so then you hire a general contractor, and then does the resident select the architect, engineer separately, or does the general contractor recommend somebody? How does it normally work?
Yeah, I mean, normally, a lot of times people will call a builder and they say, well, listen, you're going to need plans, and they would work with the design professional and they would kind of link the three parties together. It can be done in a different way. A lot of times, bigger developments, they'll work directly with the architect and they're not sure who they're going to contract with later until that time comes. But it's very common for single family, duplex type of properties for people to contact the general contractor first, and they kind of connect the dots.
Have you seen any particular trends in terms of the ones that are just sailing through, that are filled out spectacular? Is it generally contractors, or can you make a generalization? Is it generally contractors who are local? Is it general? I mean, do you see any trends in terms of how things are flowing?
I would say those that work with a design professional are they most commonly go through with very little trouble, because there's enough people putting their heads together, and there's a lot of background experience that these engineers have, and they're very familiar with the rules, for example, for windows. They know about design pressure. They know about turtle glass, which is a local requirement. So turtle glass, I might as well mention it.
Sure.
If you're on 3 sides of a building that are visible from the beach, and if it's visible from the beach, then it needs to have a certain type of glass, which is called turtle glass, or has a visual transmittance rating of below 45%, which just means that the light from inside is filtered somewhat, so the turtles know to go back to the Gulf and not towards your house. So that's one requirement in the town of Fort Myers Beach, which is different than, say, Lee County or the city of Fort Myers has different rules.
But for most part, the complexity of these applications and the information that we require, it's required by the state of Florida, right, and or the National Flood Insurance Program, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's 3 levels: federal, state, and local. Federal takes precedence over everything. So even if the state doesn't want to, the federal can still make a rule that can overrule the state, and then that translates down to local. Local can have a rule as long as it doesn't conflict with state law. But if the state law comes out, it can change or overrule everything that we have.
And we want to just convey that we want to be as transparent. There's no secrets. There's no special way to get things to everything you're saying to everybody who comes in. It's completely transparent. We want people to be successful. It's a cumbersome process. Anything else on your list that you wanted to share with people that in terms of things that you're seeing that people are running into? I have a question for you. So let's say a contractor's applying for a permit for one of our residents, and all of a sudden they didn't include the right information. It gets delayed. The resident doesn't necessarily know that, right? So they don't get notified that hey, you didn't fill this form out correct, or we need this additional information. So the resident may be wondering, why is my permit delayed with the town? But at the same time, it may be a problem with their contractor, and unless the contractor communicates that to the resident, they wouldn't necessarily know what the problem is. In other words, how does the resident, if they've hired a contractor, how do they track the progress of their permit?
Well, you can check the progress of the permit application and after it's approved or issued online. Mm-hmm. The iWork system allows you to log on and check that out. You can also, if your contractor or whoever pulls the permit, if they include another email address, we do make an attempt to send an email to both of those people so they're kind of in the loop. Okay. So that can be really helpful. If you're hiring somebody, just ask them to please include your email address as well, and we can get sort of updates out to both. So that is an issue. I think that's always an issue with permitting. Whoever pulls the permit generally has the most information.
We hear a lot of the challenges, but I think it's important for people to know that a lot of permits are being approved and going through the system. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about the numbers that are flowing through your department right now, and how many are actually being approved and sent forward? And obviously we've got some that have challenges as well. Can you just give people a sense of the scale, not only the volume, but also of the volume, and we hear a lot about the ones that are delayed, but we don't hear a lot about how many permits are actually being approved, mm-hmm. and clearly that's a pretty significant number. So would you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. It's the highest number that the town has ever experienced. I know that much. And we're not done yet. We still have all these remodels and new construction that's going to happen. So it's going to be busy for quite some time. We've had, there's thousands a month, hundreds every week for sure that are approved.
That are approved, yep, and sent sure. out. Yeah. Yep. And so once a permit is approved, then that work is done, and then does the contractor then come back, let you know it's been done, and then we send out someone to take a look at the work?
Right. So the permitting process, you get your permit approved, it gets issued, and then they do some of the work, and then at a certain point there's certain required inspections. Like before you put up your drywall, you're going to need all your what we call trade rough inspections. So there's going to be an electrical, plumbing, HVAC, mechanical, and a framing inspection. And once those are passed, then the framing inspection signifies that you now are approved to put on that wall covering. It's typically drywall. So now you put your drywall up and it covers up that work. So you need to get those permits, or those inspections called in and approved before you put up your drywall. Because you're not going to be able to see it then.
And then what happens next?
Right, so you put up your drywall. At that point, you're pretty much at your final for most projects. Your final inspection, they're just going to come back and he's going to check out the electric, all the systems. You're going to have put on all your electric fixtures and installed all your appliances and all that. So the inspector will come back, will make sure that everything is safe and code compliant. And then they pass that inspection, and then you're good to go as far as
And then the technical term is then it closes out the permit then?
Right.
And then that goes in the permanent record then at that point?
Yeah, everything is recorded and it's available online. You can pull up any kind of permit and the status.
How's your team holding up under all of this?
Good. We've lost several people, but again, some of that was state funding. Quite a bit of it was, which came from FEMA to the state to us. Where we got approval to add some people. We have some people that we interviewed and we selected and they accepted, but they have to go through their background process. So we're hoping starting next week sometime we should get some of those people in.
There was a good moment at the council where there was originally proposed for us, the state and the feds had stopped funding a number of our people, and you rightfully said, let's hire these folks, they're good people. And I think the initial request was to hire 3, and then you came up and we said, well, how many do you really need? He goes, well, we could use 4. So the council immediately gave you 4. I think there's a sense that at the council level that we want to give you all the resources you need to be successful. And so I hope you feel like those resources are there. Obviously, with each passing week, you're able to train people, get them sort of acclimated to your culture. And how's that process going as you're so busy at the same time? Mm-hmm. It's hard to do all the training at the same time you're processing. How do you manage all that?
Well, it's not always easy, but I mean, every jurisdiction is having the same sort of issues. I guess that makes us feel a little better. All the counties, cities, and in our town, everyone's really dealing with record volume. So it is what it is. But again, we're trying to be as helpful as possible. We've, in general, the vast majority of applications are going right through. So.
And if somebody includes all the information exactly as they need to, and is instructed by these forms, how long would it take for a permit to be processed?
It should be everything, and assuming it's paid for right away in a timely fashion, we send out a link. Easily within a week. I mean, it could be faster. A lot of these permits they come in and out, and that day they're issued because the scope of work is less, or it's a simpler type of permit, or it's a trade permit, for electrical.
So you recommend, again, if people are interested in speed, put the payment in immediately when you make application?
Right, you're going to need, that's one of our requirements is that the payment's received, and once that's done, it goes to review. Honestly, just you supply all the information that's asked for on the forms. I think you're doing very well. I want to talk about a notice of commencement quick, because that's another issue. Notice of commencement is a state requirement. The state law is designed to protect the property owner from potentially having to pay twice for the same renovation because of lien law. If they got into a situation where the contractor claimed that they weren't paid, they could prove, if they file that paperwork, it protects them, the property owner. Mm-hmm. It is required that it's filed on the Lee County Clerk of Court, and that's in either Fort Myers or there's an office in Cape Coral. You can do it online as well. But again, that's to be done before you actually start the work. You don't need to apply. You don't need that to get your permit, but you just need it before you actually start.
And so that's something that the contractor should be managing as well?
Typically they will, because again, not everyone's familiar with all the different rules, and the contractors do this every day. So that's very common that they would help, at least on an informational basis. Typically, they will handle it for the.
And this is called a notice
client.
Of commencement.
Right.
So you need to factor that into your strategy as you go forth with your project.
Right. So you get your permit, it's issued, you post it. You have to post it on the front of the building so that just to make sure that everyone knows they got the permit. It really helps. Before you actually start work, you have to fill out the notice of commencement and get it recorded.
And you do that. Fill that out through the county.
Right, you have to record it with the Lee County Clerk of Court. That's where it gets recorded,
that's where
on
you
the
get-
county records.
Do you get the form then from the Lee County?
We have it on our website.
Okay.
Yeah, you can get the form on our website and download it. You fill it out, you record it with the Lee County Clerk of Court, and then you get a copy that has a little recording stamp on it. And that stamp, it'll be on the side or the front. And that recorded copy you email back to us. We go ahead and put it on your permit record as well. And that allows you to actually get inspections, because it's required by state law before you get inspections.
And that notice of commencement, if people want more information about that, would they find that on our website or on the county's website?
Either. I actually updated ours. It's question 21. It's a very in-depth conversation about it in the FAQ.
So on our FAQs, great.
Yeah.
That's a great tip.
So that's something that sometimes, that doesn't help you or doesn't prevent you from getting a permit, but it does it's a question that comes up all the time.
You're going to need it for the broader process then, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so the 50% rule, there's typically an appraisal that's required. And well, I should say this, if you have a single family or like a duplex, the Lee County Property Appraiser's website, lipa.org, will have this tax roll value letter, and on that letter they'll have the building value listed. That's the value that you have to divide in two, and that's sort of your budget for repairs. If you go over that amount, you're going to need to, elevate your house or do something else like that. So that's one. So for most buildings, single family duplex, you're going to have it. But if you're some other type of building, like a condominium building or some other non-residential building, the property appraiser does not have that tax roll value letter for your building. So it's not available. So for those properties, you need to get a private appraisal to, if you were a bigger building, Diamond Head or something like that, you need to get an appraisal to show the building value. The property appraiser's office won't have that.
So in essence, all condos on the island will need a private appraisal.
The building, so typically the condo, the homeowners association, the condo owners association will handle that. They'll hire the appraiser. They will typically, so they'll get the appraisal and they'll send that in with their permit application, and that's going to allow the reviewers to compare the cost form to the appraisal.
Because Lee County looks at the value of each individual condo unit. They don't look at the value of the building as an aggregate. And so that's the one appraisal for the building as an aggregate that the condo association would have to get to submit in addition to their permit application with the town. That's helpful. I think our condo ran into that challenge as well.
And it has to do with evaluation. Sometimes they value these condominium buildings based on the income approach, and FEMA does not allow that. A lot of times, the condo value that you mentioned, for each condo, that takes into consideration what kind of benefit or what's the market value. That's like the market value for that condo, but it doesn't represent. If you add all those up, it's not the building.
And it doesn't
value.
include the common areas and other things.
I mean, there's a certain benefit that you're deriving from owning a condo, like the pool or the clubhouse, and that value is sort of factored into so they wouldn't be able to use that. So
anything else, Steve, that you want to touch on today that we haven't touched on?
If you're already floodplain compliant, which means that if your building is already elevated so that the lowest floor is above the base flood elevation plus a foot of freeboard, and you already have flood resistant material below the flood protection level, below that BFE +1, and you have flood vents for any kind of enclosure, if it's all compliant, and you may have to check with your design professional if you're not sure. But if you're already compliant and you're elevated and all that's set up, you don't necessarily need the cost forms. But you do need to include an elevation certificate that's signed and sealed that shows, that's actually certifies that your building is all compliant with the floodplain regulations. So that's a scenario that some people, I know there was one builder who said, listen, I have like a dozen houses. They're all already elevated. They have their flood vents. What do I need to do? And I said, well, you don't need the cost form in that case, you just need the elevation certificate. And then, that can really, because if you don't include it, they won't know. They needed to put it on the record to show that it's compliant. There's a bunch of other things, but again, maybe I'll put this on the website. Check out the update. I'll put this on there.
Okay.
But again, just to remind everybody that again, state law, our floodplain ordinance, all that requires that you get your building permit before you start reconstructing your building. So we allowed people, and understandably so, because it was a real disaster. I mean, to clean up, to pick up debris, and we allowed that. But as soon as you start putting in insulation, you want to put up drywall, you need to get your permit first, post it there, and then do it and call in your inspections so that we make sure it's compliant. Ultimately, we want to make sure that we help you do this the right way so you don't incur further costs or penalties later.
I think it's important, and it's important to hear it from you, Steve, but we want people to be successful in this permitting process. We want them to have a safe and appropriate process that ensures them they won't have an audit from FEMA down the road, they won't have other challenges, but at the same time we've got federal and state and FEMA regulations that make this complicated, but the staff here is not looking for reasons to say no. We want you to be successful. We understand this is pivotal to the success and the rebuilding of our island. So we really want people to be successful in this process. There's no incentive for us to not want this to go well. Is that fair?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, again, absolutely true. Also, you think about it, your insurance company requires their own inspection. They do their inspection before you. If you want to get flood insurance, you want to get hurricane insurance, they're going to inspect it as well. And if they find that you didn't have the right permit, they won't insure you, or if they do, the insurance rate will be very high. Flood insurance is particularly like that. But again, even roofs and things, there's certificates that are required every few years by the insurance companies now. They're going to want to know that you're up to code. So it ties in. It does help you in the long run as well. It's not just. I know it seems like it's onerous, and to some extent, the building code is. It's a volume of, there's 10 volumes, and you stack it up, it's 3 feet tall, and there's a lot there, but it's all about protecting the homeowner, making sure that they're able to get insurance, that it's going to be a fair rate, and so on.
Well, we appreciate Steve being with us this morning. We know he's busy. Hopefully this will take a little of the heat off in terms of answering some questions. This is his third visit to Key Questions with Key staffers, because we know this is the most pressing issue facing our island. So we're thankful for you being here. Thank you for your service to the town. And we're going to take a brief break here, and then we're going to go over to the sand dunes across Estero Boulevard. And we're going to talk with Chad a little bit about the emergency berm sand that is coming to our island and what's going to be done. And I think there's a little scour right by that sand pile Chad can explain to us how that sand will be utilized to make the beach nice again and repair some of the damage. So we'll be back in just a minute. Thanks for staying with us. Hi, welcome back. I wanted to take a moment and acknowledge Jacob Trujillo, who's our cameraman for Key Questions. Jacob has gone and done, he goes beyond the call of duty, and he's really been helpful in producing the show. His full-time job is the IT guy for the town of Fort Myers Beach, so we just wanted to thank Jacob because his work is he does a great job on the camera, a lot better than the talent. Anyways, our second special guest, Chad Chustz, is our environmental engineer? What is the title? I always forget.
Environmental project manager.
Environmental project manager.
I have to go back to school to be an engineer.
No, that's okay. That's okay. So we're here to talk a little bit about the emergency berm, and we have a lot of pre-positioned sand. You'll see it up and down Fort Myers Beach. It's right behind us. Chad, how many locations have the sand pre-positioned on the island?
We had 5. One near Lanikai, one right here next to Town Hall. Junkanoo was being used, but I think that's been demobilized. One at Wyndham, and then one at Bahama Beach Club, where I think they're going to be restocking that one. And I'm also hearing that Newton Park's going to be remediated soon, and we'll start using that to stockpile some sand.
Excellent. Our trucks, obviously all of the sand that's been pre-positioned for the emergency berm sand, it's about $7 million project that's funded by the feds. That's been trucked into our island. When they do beach renourishment, which is a $25 million project, that'll be pumped in from off the Gulf of Mexico onto the beach. But this first round is trucked in sand. Like you said, it's pre-positioned here. Are the trucks already beginning to move it out onto the beach?
Yeah, you can see a few spots where they've moved it on the south end. We've done our 10 days of monitoring, bird monitoring, that was required by our by our permit. So they're starting to lay it down south, adjacent to the CWA. Nothing's going inside of the CWA or nothing inside the federal COBRA zone, which is the Coastal Barrier Resource Act. So there's a site down there that we're avoiding per the guidance of U.S. Fish and Wildlife. But yeah, we're laying down trying to get it done over there as much as we can first to...
so the entire CWA doesn't get any emergency berm sand, or just...
Correct, yeah. So it's going to be on the landward side. So somewhere like Bermuda Dunes and Estero Beach and Tennis Club, you'll see it's much closer. We had to put it much closer to the buildings than we had previously had.
But that is in the CWA, so they will be getting sand. Just have to be careful where they put it then, right?
So it's on the landward side of the CWA. You know, there's a demarcation.
Oh, I see. So it's just,
Right.
as you get closer to the condos, it's not technically in the CWA anymore. Is that right?
Correct. Adjacent to it, yeah.
All right. And so we've got all. So that's, and when they initially put the sand out for the emergency berm, is it all just in piles, and then they come back later and shape it?
Yeah, they literally just take the dump trucks out, sometimes 2 or 3 wide, depending on how much sand they need in an area, and then they'll come back and grade it to spec.
So if people see the initial pile and they're startled by it, that isn't what the berm is going to look like, right?
Correct.
So tell me what happens to that sand pile then once they come in and shape it.
Yeah, they all have some dozers out there. It's around 6.5 feet above mean high water. And they have a specified, I think it's a 4-to-1 or 5-to-1 slope that they have to put it down to, and then up to that elevation of 6.5 feet to give that protection from the storm surge that we hopefully don't have, but just in case.
Very good. Now, if anybody wants to come and look at this sand, it's high quality sand. We're right next to Mom's here, and we're right across the street from Chapel by the Sea. I mean, the sand is, talk a little bit about how high quality this sand is.
Sure. So it meets our color spec. It's really white, and a little bit of a coarser grain than our native sand, but still within DEP specs for grain size. Very little, if any, silts, and again, that white sand to match our native sand, which is important for sea turtles. Their sex is determined by temperature, and the temperature of the sand is determined by color. So it's good that we match that native sand.
Chad, in order to get this emergency berm sand for people who live here on the Gulf, they have to sign an easement. For those who have not signed the easement yet, what are they missing out on this particular project?
So if you don't receive the sand, it's, if you start pricing out getting sand into your backyard, that is the beach, you're looking at $850 a truckload, which is about 18 cubic yards. It's a highly valuable, a lot of quality sand onto your property that's going to increase your property value, and build back that beach and get it looking good again, like it was before the hurricane.
So there's still time to sign the sign the easement for the emergency berm, but they're running out of time. Is that fair?
Yes, we're definitely running out of time.
For people who want to sign that emergency, they take a look at the sand, they realize they see their neighbors having this beautiful berm. How do they contact the town to sign up or to sign that easement?
Sure, you can email me anytime, chadd@fmbgov.com. And we also have a web page where they can download the easement document. It's at fmbgov.com/beach. And we put some links there as well as some information about the berm itself, the construction plans.
And for the emergency berm, that's going to be as close to the buildings as possible. And the renourishment phase, which will be later on, will be closer to the water itself, from the water to the emergency berm, right?
Yeah, so the renourishment's going to cover the entire beach, pretty much all the way up to their armament or seawall or toe of the vegetation.
Is that regardless of whether people sign the easement or not? The renourishment will be along the entire beach?
So if they don't sign the easement for the renourishment, then we won't pump sand landward of the erosion control line, which is the property line.
Okay. But the beach, the entire beach will, beyond that point, will get the renourishment then.
I'm hoping so. It'll be good. It'll be a good thing for the beach to get that sand.
It's $32 million worth of sand that the town has to put $1 million in, and it's a once in a lifetime opportunity to really renovate, rejuvenate our beach. Is that fair?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else you wanted to add?
Nope, just give me a call if you have any questions. Happy to talk it out and answer any concerns that people may have.
I want to thank everybody for being with us today. This is Key Questions with Key Staffers. My name is Jim Adderholt. I'm the Vice Mayor of the town of Fort Myers Beach. Again, if you like what you hear today, you think it would be helpful to others, please feel free to post this on your Facebook page. Thanks for taking the time to be with us. And again, we're doing everything we can to rebuild our island as quickly as possible, and you're a big part of that. So thank you so much for being with us. God bless. Take care.